6 weeks ago, a woman in a hospital waiting room offered a stranger the last dollar in her purse. She didn't ask his name. She didn't ask if he'd pay her back. She just pressed it into his hand and said, "Get yourself something warm." That stranger was worth $400 million. And tonight, he was standing at a podium in front of every surgeon, board member, and donor in Atlanta's most prestigious hospital. And he was looking directly at her. Before we get to what happened next, if you love stories where the humble are lifted and the proud are humbled, subscribe to New African Folktales right now and turn on your notifications. Because what this man did for that woman, it will stay with you. Now let me take you back to where it all started. Tobias Mensah-Cole had a reputation for two things: saving lives and not caring about much else. At 44 years old, Tobias was the founder of Cole Health Partners, a private equity firm that owned hospital networks across the American South. His name was on 3 buildings, 2 research wings, and a pediatric oncology unit that had treated over 1,000 children in the last decade. Forbes had written about him. The Atlanta Business Chronicle called him the most influential man in Georgia healthcare. His assistant sent flowers to people's birthdays because Tobias himself never remembered. He had money. He had influence. He had a corner office in Buckhead with a view that would make you forget your own name. What he didn't have was anyone who would tell him the truth. His business partner of 11 years, a man named Gerald, had been quietly redirecting vendor contracts to a shell company he owned on the side. Tobias found out by accident, a line item that didn't add up in a quarterly report at 2 in the morning. Gerald denied it. Then the lawyers confirmed it. $3 million. Gone. And with it, whatever trust Tobias had managed to hold on to. Before Gerald, there was Simone. They had dated for 2 years. She was sharp, ambitious, charming at dinner parties. She broke up with him in a text message the week after he lost his first company, a small clinic group that went under during the 2008 crash. She wrote, "I can't do this right now, Toby. Call me when things stabilize." Things stabilized, she called. He had already learned the lesson. His mother, Akosua, had come to America from Kumasi, Ghana, in 1981 with $40 and a suitcase full of fabric she planned to sell. She raised Tobias in a 2-bedroom apartment in Decatur, Georgia, working double shifts at a nursing home for 17 years. She called him every Sunday. He answered every Sunday. It was the one thing in his schedule that never moved. One evening in October, she called on a Tuesday. "Tobias, Mama, you never call on Tuesday. Is everything okay? I am getting old. Old people do strange things." A pause. "I've been thinking about you. I'm fine, Mama." "I didn't ask if you were fine. I asked if you were happy. Those are different questions." Silence. "Your father, God rest him, used to say something. Do you remember?" "Mama." He would say, "You cannot know the weight of water until you carry it yourself." He meant, you cannot know what a person carries until you carry nothing, until you stand where they stand. Tobias said nothing. "You have been surrounded by people who want something from you for so long, my son, that you have forgotten what it feels like when someone wants nothing. Find that feeling again, before it's too late." She hung up. Tobias sat in his Buckhead office for a long time after that. The city glittered below him, indifferent and beautiful. He thought about Gerald. He thought about Simone. He thought about the 43 people who had sent him birthday messages last month, most of whom he could not have picked out of a lineup. He had a board meeting in the morning, a donor dinner on Thursday, a helicopter to Charleston on Friday. He rescheduled all of it. He called his chief of operations, a woman named Bernadette, who had worked for him for 6 years and was, as far as Tobias could tell, the only genuinely honest person on his payroll. "Bernie, Mr. Cole, the Charleston thing, push everything. 2 weeks, 2 weeks. May I ask why?" Personal matter. A beat. Are you ill? No. I'm going to do something my mother told me to do. Another beat. Should I be worried? Probably not. But hold all decisions until I check in. And where will you be? Somewhere nobody knows my name. He put on the oldest clothes he owned, a faded gray sweatshirt, khaki pants with a fraying hem, running shoes he'd bought 3 years ago and only ever used for exactly this kind of purpose. He took a single prepaid phone, $40 in cash, and his transit card. He left his real phone in the office. He walked down the service stairs, out the side door, and into the Atlanta morning like smoke. Nobody looked at him. For a man who was used to rooms rearranging themselves around his presence, that invisibility hit differently than he expected. Not sad, exactly. More like cold water, clarifying. For the first 5 days, he simply moved through the city, rode the train, sat in parks, ate fast food and drank coffee from gas stations. He noticed things he had never noticed before. How long people waited for buses. How many people were eating alone. How exhausting it was to be on your feet all day with nowhere to sit that didn't cost money. On day 4, he encountered Priya. He was standing outside a pharmacy in Midtown, reading the posted bus schedule, when a white Mercedes pulled up to the curb. A woman stepped out, late 30s, blowout, silk blouse, heels that were not made for concrete. She was on her phone, gesturing at something with one hand, the other hand holding a coffee that probably cost more than Tobias had in his pocket. She walked toward the pharmacy door and nearly collided with Tobias. "Watch it," she said, not looking at him. "Sorry. This area is becoming impossible." She said it to the air, or maybe to whoever was on the phone. Then she looked at Tobias for exactly 1 second, up and down, and something shifted in her face. Not disgust exactly, erasure. As if he had been reclassified. "Do you need something? There's a shelter on Spring Street. I'm reading the bus schedule. Okay." She said it the way people say okay when they mean that's your problem. She pushed through the pharmacy door and disappeared. Tobias stood there. He thought, I know that woman, not personally. But he knew the type. He had been that type once, before Kumasi and Decatur became just footnotes in his biography. He recognized the particular armor of someone who had decided that visible poverty was a kind of moral failure. Contagious, something to be managed away from the door. He kept moving. Day 9. He had found a spot near the grassy area outside Grady Memorial Hospital where people often sat. Patients waiting for rides, workers on break, occasionally someone who had nowhere else to be. Nobody bothered you there. The hospital was part of his portfolio, technically. He had sat in its boardroom 12 times. He had never sat on this bench. That was the day he saw Ifia Darko for the first time. She came out of the hospital's side entrance in blue scrubs with a stripe of something, soup, maybe, across the left sleeve. She was carrying 2 vending machine coffees and a small paper bag, and she was walking fast in the way that people walk when they have exactly 19 minutes and they're going to use all of them. She stopped when she saw an elderly man sitting on the bench beside Tobias, a patient, clearly, in a hospital gown with a thin blanket over his lap, no shoes, staring at the pavement with the expression of a person who has been waiting for someone who isn't coming. Ifia stopped. "Mr. Curtis." Her voice was warm, immediate. "What are you doing out here? It's 52 degrees. I needed some air," the old man said. "They won't let me have any air in there. They'll let you have air. Come on, I'll take you back. I don't want to go back." She sat down beside him, set both coffees on the bench between them, opened the paper bag, a pack of crackers, a small container of peanut butter. "Then we'll sit out here for a few minutes." "You want a cracker?" The old man looked at the crackers. "Those were supposed to be your lunch. I had a granola bar at 11. I'm fine." She opened the pack and handed him one. They sat there for a while, the 3 of them, Tobias pretending to look at his phone. The old man eating crackers, Ifia, drinking her coffee in small sips like she was rationing warmth. She didn't look at her watch once. She just sat with him, like there was nowhere else she needed to be. After a while, the old man agreed to go inside. Ifia stood, gathered the wrappers, tucked the blanket more firmly around him, walked him to the door. Then she came back, picked up the remaining coffee, and sat back down on the bench. She looked tired, not defeated, just used up in the way that people who care too much at a job that demands everything get used up by mid-afternoon. She glanced at Tobias. "Sorry if we were in your space." "You weren't." She nodded and started to stand. "That was kind," Tobias said. "What you did for him." She shrugged, but not dismissively. "He's been in there 6 weeks. His daughter lives in Phoenix, and she's got 2 kids and no paid leave. He's just lonely." She paused. Loneliness makes people sicker. The studies are actually pretty clear on it. But we treat the body and forget there's a person in it. Then she was gone, back through the side entrance, the door swinging shut behind her. Tobias sat with that sentence for a long time. We treat the body and forget there's a person in it. He came back to that bench the next day, and the day after that. Ifia Darko was a patient care technician at Grady, not a nurse, not a doctor. Something the hospital's hierarchy had quietly decided was less important, even though she was often the person patients saw most. She had come to Atlanta from Accra, Ghana, 8 years ago on a student visa, earned a healthcare administration degree from Georgia State, and then discovered that her Ghanaian credentials and her degree together still weren't enough to get her the job she'd actually trained for. So she worked the floor, 12-hour shifts. She took blood pressures and changed linens and sat with people who were afraid and held hands through procedures that were minor on paper and enormous in practice. She made $11 more per hour than she had in Accra, which was enough to send money home to her mother every month, enough to rent a room in a shared house in East Point, enough to keep the lights on. Not enough for anything extra. Not often. Tobias learned all of this in pieces over days, sitting on the bench during the window of time she took her breaks. When she took them at all, she was easy to talk to, not performatively warm, the way people sometimes are when they think warmth is a strategy. Just genuine. She asked questions because she was actually interested in the answers. She asked him his name. He said Tobias. It was true. She asked what he did. He paused, between things right now. She didn't push. That's all right. I was between things for a long time. It has a way of teaching you stuff that being solidly placed never does. He asked about her family. She told him about her mother in Accra, a retired school teacher with a bad hip and a good garden. She told him about her younger brother Kweku, who was studying engineering and who called her every week to ask for advice she wasn't qualified to give but gave anyway. She didn't talk about herself the way people who are proud of suffering do. She talked about her life the way people who are simply living it do. Matter-of-factly, with humor, with the occasional flash of something that might have been longing but was always quickly replaced by something more practical. "Do you like it?" Tobias asked once. "The work. I love it," she said, without hesitation. "I hate what it doesn't pay me. But the work itself," she shook her head. "When someone is scared and you can sit with them and be steady for them, that's," she searched for the word. "That's something. That matters." Tobias thought about Gerald, about the $11 million deal they'd celebrated with a dinner at Bones, about how that dinner had felt like something, and how it actually wasn't. On day 17, he watched Priya again. She came into the hospital. He was in the lobby, waiting, in a different silk blouse, same energy. She was there for an appointment, apparently, one that involved a certain amount of administrative distress. Something about billing. Her voice carried across the lobby. "This is completely unacceptable." Do you have any idea how long I've been a patient here? The woman at the front desk, young, patient, absorbing the volume without expression. I understand, ma'am. I don't need you to look into it. I need someone who can actually solve it. Can you get me a manager? Ifia happened to be crossing the lobby at that moment. She paused, assessed the situation in exactly 1 second, walked over. Hi there, I'm Ifia. Can I help figure out what's going on? Priya looked her over. The scrubs, the badge, the soup stripe, today replaced by a clean sleeve, but still. The read was immediate. Are you in billing? No, but I know who to call. Let's step over here and I can get this sorted in about 5 minutes. Priya's expression said she doubted that, but she followed. 12 minutes later, the billing issue, a duplicate charge, easily corrected, was resolved. Ifia came back out, nodded at the front desk woman, touched her shoulder briefly. Priya caught up with her near the elevator. Tobias watched from across the lobby. Thank you, Priya said. Then, almost as an afterthought, something that sounded less like gratitude than like surprise. You were very efficient. Just doing my job, Ifia said pleasantly. Well, still. Priya's gaze dropped. To the badge, the scrubs, some internal calculation. You know, with your manner, you could probably do something more. Have you considered? I love what I do, Ifia said. She smiled. It was a complete smile, no crack in it. Have a good day. And she was gone. Tobias had to turn away to compose himself. Later on the bench, he asked her about it. Not the specifics. He didn't want to reveal he'd been watching. Just the general question of how she dealt with patients or visitors who were dismissive. She was quiet for a moment. My grandmother used to say, some people have confused having things with being worthy. She didn't say it with anger. She said it like a diagnosis, like, oh, that's the disease this person has. And you don't hate someone for being sick. You just make sure you don't catch it. Tobias looked at her. You're very wise, he said. She laughed, a real laugh, short and bright. I'm very tired. Tired people say true things because we don't have energy for anything else. He laughed too, and realized it had been almost 6 weeks since he had laughed at anything. Day 23 was the day everything cracked. It was raining. One of those Atlanta rains that comes in sideways and doesn't apologize. Tobias arrived at the bench early. Ifia came out 40 minutes later than usual. No coffee, no bag. She sat down heavily. Long one? Tobias said. We lost someone this morning. She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. She just sat with it, looking at the wet concrete, and Tobias sat with her. After a while, she said, I almost didn't come in today. My bus pass ran out yesterday, and I've been doing the math. I've got about $32 to get to my next check, and I need to cover the bus for 6 more days. She said it the way you say something, when you've been turning it over so long that saying it out loud doesn't feel like a confession anymore, just a fact. $32 for 6 days, Tobias said. $5 and change per day for round trips on the 55 line. I can make it work. I usually can. She paused. She exhaled. Sometimes I wish the math didn't have to be so constant. You know, like, I wish there was a day where I didn't have to calculate everything. Tobias reached into his pocket. He had $38. He had kept himself down to small amounts, precisely because he didn't want to accidentally give away his cover with a wallet full of cash. He pulled out one of the 20s. Ifia saw him and immediately shook her head. No, Tobias, I wasn't asking. I know you weren't. I can't take your. You've given me coffee 3 times, and you've never once let me give you anything back. This was true. She'd handed him a vending machine coffee twice when she had 2. Once she'd brought out an extra pack of crackers and set it next to him without a word, like it was nothing. Take it. She looked at the bill. You probably need this. I'm all right today. She took it, held it like it was slightly more than money. I'll pay you back. You won't. I will. Ifia, you sat with a scared old man and gave him your lunch crackers and didn't check your watch once. We're already even. She looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes were very direct. She had the kind of face that didn't perform emotions. It just showed them honestly, one at a time. You're not what you look like, she said. It wasn't an accusation. It was an observation, the same way she might note that a patient's color was off. Clinical but not cold. What do I look like? Like someone between things. A pause. But not the kind of between things that comes from having nothing. The kind that comes from choosing. The accuracy of it sat between them. You're very perceptive, he said. I'm a PCT in a hospital. I have to be. I read people fast, or I miss things that matter. She stood up. Her break was over. Whatever it is you're sorting out, Tobias, I hope you find what you're looking for. She went back inside. He sat on the wet bench in the rain for a long time. That evening, he called Bernadette from the prepaid phone. I need you to pull the personnel records for patient care staff at Grady on contract through Cole Health, specifically a Ifia Darko, D-A-R-K-O. A pause. May I ask why? I want to know what she makes. I want to know her full employment history with us. Another pause. Tobias, are you? I'm fine, just pull it. She called him back in 40 minutes. Ifia Darko, 8 years at Grady. Consistently high patient satisfaction scores. In the 93rd percentile hospital-wide for the past 4 years. 2 formal commendations from department chiefs. 1 note in her file from a patient's family that Bernadette read aloud, and that Tobias had to ask her to stop reading, because something was happening in his throat. Hourly rate, $17.80. Tobias sat with that number for a long time. Bernie, yes. What does a healthcare administration degree from Georgia State qualify someone for in our network? A very long pause. Several things. Patient Services Coordinator, Department Operations Associate. Depending on the program concentration, potentially. What does a Department Operations Associate make? Entry level, mid-50s. With her years of experience, she'd come in around 65. Tobias looked at the Atlanta skyline, the same skyline from a completely different angle. Pull together what you need to make a formal offer, he said. Full benefits. The works. Do you want to wait until you're no? He had 1 more week. He used it carefully. He needed to be sure. Not because he doubted what he had seen, but because he had been wrong before, and he could not afford to be wrong about this. He watched her. He watched how she moved through days that would have worn most people into something smaller. He watched her hand a granola bar to a man asleep near the bus stop without waking him. He watched her stay an extra 40 minutes on a Thursday because a teenager in the waiting room was crying and there was no one else. He watched her let something mean pass through her without sticking. And on his last day, day 30, he walked up to the bench and sat down and waited for her break. When she came out, she had a coffee, and she brought a second one, the way she sometimes did, and she set it on the bench beside him. Last day, he said. She looked at him. Of what? Of this. He took a breath. Ifia, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear me out before you say anything. She wrapped both hands around her coffee. Okay, my name is Tobias Mensah Cole, Cole Health Partners, the firm that holds the contract with this hospital. That's mine. I started it. I run it. I am not between things. I have not been between things for 20 years. The coffee in her hands didn't move. I came out here because my mother told me I had forgotten what it felt like to be around someone who wanted nothing from me. And she was right. He met her eyes. I wanted to find out if that kind of person still existed. I didn't know if I believed they did. The silence was long. So you own this hospital, she said finally. My firm holds the management contract. Yes. And you've been sitting on that bench for 30 days. She looked away, then she looked back. The coffee, did you? Yes. You gave me coffee 3 times and crackers twice, and once you covered the last 40 cents I needed for the vending machine without even mentioning it. He paused. And on a Tuesday, when you had just lost a patient and $32 to last 6 days, you sat on that bench and didn't ask for a thing. You just talked to me like I was a person. A long pause. Tobias. Her voice was careful, not angry. Careful, the way someone is careful with something that might break. I need you to understand something. Tell me. I didn't do any of that because I expected anything back. I did it because that's how my grandmother raised me. You feed people because people need feeding. You sit with people because people need company. She paused. I would have done all of it exactly the same if you'd been exactly who you looked like. I know. He looked at his hands. That's why I'm telling you. She was quiet for a moment. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed. Not a polite laugh. A genuine one startled out of her, a whole CEO. Sitting on a hospital bench in a Walmart sweatshirt, eating vending machine crackers. She shook her head. Tobias, what is wrong with you? He started laughing too. It felt like something unlocking. When they settled, she looked at him differently. Not suspicious, not dazzled, just recalibrated. What happens now? She said. There's a hospital foundation gala in 2 weeks. They're honoring the Cole Health Partners Endowment, a grant program my firm funded for frontline staff development. I'd like you to come with me. He paused. But before that, there's something else. Bernadette, my chief of operations, is putting together an offer. Department Operations Associate. The pay is different. The benefits are different. It wouldn't. Tobias, I know how it sounds. But I need you to know I pulled your record before I knew I was going to tell you any of this. Your patient satisfaction scores, the note from the Whitmore family. She went still. You read that note? Bernie started reading it and I asked her to stop. He cleared his throat. It was a good note, Ifia. Her eyes were bright. She looked away. The offer isn't because of this, he said. The offer is because you're worth 3 times what that hospital is paying you, and I should have known that, and I didn't, and now I do. She was quiet for a long time. I'll look at the offer, she said finally. I'm not agreeing to anything I haven't read. I wouldn't expect you to, and the gala. She picked up her coffee. I don't have. I know. I'm not wearing anything you paid for without knowing the cost first. Noted. And if the food is bad, then we'll find somewhere better after. She gave him a look. Considering. You're a strange man, Tobias Mensah-Cole. I've been told. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. She is. Does she know you did this? She told me to do it. She just didn't specify the method. Ifia laughed again. She stood up, smoothed her scrubs. I have to go back in. Mr. Curtis has PT in 20 minutes, and he hates PT and he needs someone to talk him into it. Tell him I said hello. She looked at him, really looked, and something in her face settled into something like warmth. I'll see you, Tobias. You'll see me. She went back inside. The Atlanta Foundation Healthcare Gala was held at the Four Seasons in Midtown. 14 floors of glass and black marble, and people who thought the word access was a full sentence. The Cole Health Partners Endowment was being formally announced. A $7 million fund for frontline healthcare staff professional development, fully paid training programs, tuition reimbursement, and pathway grants for workers who wanted to advance but couldn't afford the steps. Nobody knew whose idea it was. Tobias had structured it that way. Tonight, he was unmistakably himself again. Navy wool suit, clean shave, the watch his mother had given him, the year the company turned profitable. He was recognizable. Rooms remembered how to rearrange themselves. Ifia wore dark green silk. Simple. She had done something with her hair that involved small braids and a kind of quiet elegance that made the room's carefully assembled fashion feels slightly overdressed by comparison. She held a clutch that she told him, in the car, she had borrowed from her coworker Shakira and fully intended to return by Monday. She walked into that room and looked around at it with clear eyes, not intimidated, not performing comfort she didn't feel, just present. "This is a lot," she said quietly. "Yes, do these people do anything other than stand near tables and look important? Sometimes they sit near tables and look important." She bit back a smile. "Lead the way." Tobias moved through the room. People stopped him, shook hands, asked about the endowment. He was smooth, engaged, present. But he kept one hand lightly near Ifia's elbow. Not steering, just making clear they were together. And then, near the champagne table, he saw Priya. She was there. Of course she was. She sat on 2 foundation boards and attended everything that had the word gala in the title. She was working the room in a red gown, lightly touching people's arms, laughing at exactly the right moments. She hadn't noticed him yet. She noticed Ifia first, but not in the way she should have. The same read, the same fraction of a second, the same quiet reclassification. She leaned toward the woman beside her and said something behind her glass. Then she saw Tobias. The champagne flute stopped halfway to her mouth. She recognized him, not from the bench, from every function, every magazine feature, every board meeting his name had ever been attached to in Atlanta. The dirty gray sweatshirt and the bus bench and the quiet voice, those she had already discarded and forgotten. But this, the suit, the watch, the room rearranging itself around him. She looked at Ifia, then back at Tobias, and she understood. The MC stepped to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce the founder and driving force behind tonight's announced endowment. A man who has been changing Atlanta healthcare for over a decade and who asked us tonight to let him say a few words. Please welcome Tobias Mensah Cole." The room applauded. Tobias walked to the podium, straightened the microphone. "Let it be quiet. I'm not going to give you a long speech about giving back," he said. "I'm going to tell you a story instead. 6 weeks ago, I put on old clothes, and I walked out of this city's machinery, and I sat on a bench outside Grady Memorial Hospital. I wanted to see how people treated someone who appeared to have nothing. And I want to be honest with you about what I found." The room was very still. "I found that some people looked through me. Some people redirected me. One person, on 3 separate occasions, made it clear that my visible poverty was a problem she needed solved rather than a person she might help. He didn't look at Priya. He didn't need to. And I found one person who did none of those things." He looked at Ifia. "A woman who gave a stranger coffee she bought with her own money, who shared her lunch with a lonely patient when she had almost nothing left, who, on a day when she had $32 between her and her next paycheck, told me about it not as a complaint, but just as the truth of her life. And who never, in 30 days, did a single kind thing because she expected anything in return. She did it because that is who she is." The room was silent. "That woman has worked in this hospital for 8 years. She has patient satisfaction scores that most physicians in this city would not be able to match. She has a letter in her file from a family she sat with through the worst night of their lives that I cannot read in full without." He stopped, cleared his throat. "She makes $17.80 an hour. He let that sit in the room. "The Cole Health Partners Staff Development Endowment exists because of her. Not for her, for every person like her, in every hospital in our network, doing work that is worth more than we pay them and more than we see. The endowment will fund advancement pathways, tuition support, and professional development for frontline staff, because the people who are closest to our patients are often the last people we invest in." He stepped back from the podium. "Ifia Darko, would you stand?" The spotlight found her. She stood slowly, one hand at her throat, eyes very bright. The room rose. The applause was not polite room applause. It was the real kind, the kind that happens when people are, despite themselves, genuinely moved. It rolled through the Four Seasons ballroom, and Ifia stood in the middle of it and looked like a person who had never once asked for this and was receiving it anyway, and that made it mean something. Tobias stepped down from the podium, crossed the room, and stood beside her. "I told you," he said quietly. "Just be you." "The food here," she said, her voice slightly unsteady, "is going to have to be very good after this." He laughed. She laughed. And around them, Atlanta's most important people applauded two people from the same African soil who had found each other in the most ordinary place imaginable: a hospital bench, a vending machine coffee, and $32 that had to last 6 days. Priya left early. The story didn't go viral the way some stories do. No one had filmed the speech. But it moved, the way true things move, person by person, table to table. The endowment applications opened 2 weeks later and received 412 submissions in the first 48 hours. Bernadette called Tobias to report this. "Also," she said, "Mrs. Darko accepted the offer. She starts in the new role in 3 weeks. Good." She also sent back the contract with 2 handwritten questions in the margin. What questions? She wants to know if the endowment will also cover staff who want to complete nursing prerequisites, or only those who are already in accredited programs. Tobias smiled. "Tell her it'll cover the prerequisites, and tell her we're adding that to the language." Noted. She also asked whether she could keep her Saturdays in the ward. He laughed. "She can keep whatever she wants." Tobias's mother, Akosua, flew in from Decatur 3 months later for a Sunday dinner that Ifia cooked. Groundnut soup, jollof rice, plantain, the kind of meal that takes most of a Saturday to prepare, and that makes people very quiet when they first taste it. Akosua held Ifia's hands in both of hers at the kitchen table, and for a moment she just looked at her. "My son called me after you told him you would have done all of it the same," Akosua said. "Even if he had truly had nothing, I would have," Ifia said simply. Akosua nodded. "I know. He finally knows, too." She squeezed her hands. "You are the answer to a prayer I prayed for 20 years. Ifia looked over at Tobias, who was in the doorway, pretending to check his phone so neither of them would see his face. "He is a strange man," Ifia said. "Very strange," Akosua agreed. "But he carries his father's heart." She paused. "His father used to say, 'You cannot know the weight of water until you carry it yourself.' And I think my son finally carried it, and found someone to help him put it down." They were married the following spring, not at the Four Seasons, at Grady Memorial Hospital's rooftop garden, small, practical, beautiful, in the way that things are beautiful when they don't try. Mr. Curtis was there in his wheelchair, in a blazer, 2 sizes too large, and the expression of someone attending the best thing that has happened to him in years. Bernadette cried, which surprised everyone, including Bernadette. Kwaku flew in from Accra and spent most of the reception asking Tobias questions about American infrastructure. Ifia wore the same dark green. Tobias wore his father's watch. In her vows, she said, "You came and sat on a bench next to me like you had nothing. And I gave you what I had because that's all there is, ever, giving what you have, to who is next to you. I didn't know who you were. I still don't entirely. But I know you're the person who laughed at my grandmother's sayings and asked about Kwaku and let Mr. Curtis tell you the same story 4 times without checking your phone. That is enough. That will always be enough," he said. "My mother told me to go find out who loved me when I had nothing. I went looking for a feeling. I found you. Those turned out to be the same thing. And the lesson, if you need it said plainly, and sometimes we do, the most valuable thing in any room is rarely the most expensive thing. And the most important work being done in any building is rarely the work that gets the biggest paycheck. Pay attention to who shows up fully, who gives what they have, who sits with people when there's nothing in it for them. Those are the ones worth knowing. Those are the ones worth becoming. If this story stayed with you, subscribe to New African Folktales and turn on your notifications. Every week, we bring you a new story, and we never forget the ones who give from the little they have.